Let's pick things up there for tonight's Political Insider. Joining me, Kevin Cirilli, reporter for The Hill. Kevin, as we know, there's been a momentum shift since the second Republican presidential debate. Carly Fiorina is gaining in the polls, but before we talk about her surge, let's discuss the growing controversy of Dr. Ben Carson's comments during Meet the Press. Do it one more time. We had an audio problem. Let's pick things up there for tonight's Political Insider. Joining me, Kevin Cirilli, reporter for The Hill. Kevin, as we know, there's been a momentum shift since the second Republican presidential debate. Carly Fiorina is gaining in the polls, but before we talk about her surge, let's discuss the growing controversy over Dr. Ben Carson's comments. During Meet the Press, Carson said a Muslim should not be president. How damaging is this for Carson? Some want him to withdraw from the campaign.
I don't think it's just damaging for Dr. Carson, but it's also damaging for the Republican Party as a whole. It comes at a time when in a very crowded Republican field, the party has had a tough time talking about a cohesive economic message and getting on the offense in terms of policy proposals. But for Dr. Carson, who has really surged to the front of the pack as a political outsider, one of the top three, as you mentioned, behind Donald Trump and still slightly ahead of Carly Fiorina, this is the first significant hit to his record as someone who, you know, raises the question about whether or not he'd be a mainstream candidate in a general election, and also trying to appeal to independent voters. This is not the type of rhetoric that is forward-thinking or, quite frankly, is going to win him votes in Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania, Virginia, you name it.
Now, the controversy comes only days after Donald Trump raised eyebrows with this exchange with a supporter.
We have a problem in this country. It's called Muslims. We know our current president is one. Right. You know he's not even an American.
We need this
birth
question.
certificates, man. But anyway, we have training camps growing where they want to kill us. That's my question. When can we get rid of
We're going to be looking at a lot of different things. And, you know, a lot of people are saying that, and a lot of people are saying that bad things are happening out there. We're going to be looking at that and plenty of other things.
Both Republicans and Democrats have come out against Trump on this, calling his reaction troubling and wrong, yet he's still popular. Could this be the straw?
You know, I'm not going to count Donald Trump out. Every time people have done that, it's just backfired and proven wrong. So I don't think that this is going to be the thing that takes Donald Trump out. But I think it's part of a larger trend. And I think the trend is that when he gives his controversial remarks, it ends up hurting him in the longer term. What's interesting about the clip that you just played, Morris, is that it really didn't appear presidential to see him respond to such a quite frankly, crazy assertion. And so I think that he's going to have to kind of weigh the presidential response. If you think back to the 2008 cycle where Senator John McCain had a very similar exchange with a voter, he handled it much more differently. He handled it much more measured and actually ended up defending then candidate Obama and saying that he is an American. And so I think that, you know, the larger takeaway is that either candidate in either party, you want to put forth an optimistic, forward-thinking message. And I'm not sure at all that the exchange that you just played captures that notion, and it misses the mark, to say the least.
Kevin, let's switch gears to Carly Fiorina. New polls have her in second place, toppling Ben Carson and gaining on Trump. She says the surge will continue to grow, but questions keep dogging her about her time at Hewlett-Packard. Does Fiorina have staying power?
I think that Carly Fiorina is much better prepared to take on her business record than she was during her failed Senate bid when she ran in California. Here's why. I've interviewed her about her business record, and if you really get into the weeds of it, she was hired during the right before the tech bubble collapsed, and so Hewlett-Packard was going through a very difficult transition period at that time, and the Hewletts and the Packards wanted to bring on an outsider business leader, someone who would create a little buzz for the company, and Carly Fiorina was the first Fortune 20 female CEO, and she also had no connections to the Hewlett or Packard families. And so, yeah, she did rub people a lot the wrong way, and she's been very upfront about that, but she's adamant that she set up the company for long-term economic growth. And I gotta be honest here, anyone who points at the stock prices during her time and criticizes her for that, but then also goes and says that the stock market currently is no way of judging the economy as a whole, that's a very hypocritical line of attack to make. So do I think Carly Fiorina has staying power? I think that she's positioned herself quite well for the next month, but whether or not she's going to be able to sustain that and get the kind of money that she needs remains to be seen. But I did call it, Morris. I will say I called that her surge would happen.
Yep, I appreciate your views on that. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton continues to hold the lead among Democrats. Is the email controversy losing steam?
No, not at all, because in the next couple of weeks, she's going to have to testify on Capitol Hill at the same time as the first Democratic debate. And I gotta be honest, when you talk to Democratic strategists, there's really no question that the Democratic establishment has tried to stifle debate. And there's a lot of frustration among the grassroots. Just look at the protest vote that is Senator Bernie Sanders, a socialist from Vermont.
Yeah.
So there's growing concern that people want to have a debate. There's a huge opening for Vice President Joe Biden to enter into the race. And I would be carefully watching this week the images of Vice President Biden sitting behind Pope Francis during a joint session of Congress. We all know how important the Vice President Biden's faith is to him, and I think those images are going to be really telling in the later half of this week.
All right, talking about Biden, we're inching closer to October. Do you think we'll hear anything from the Biden camp soon?
I do. And again, I think that kind of starts at the end of this week as he reflects with his faith and with Pope Francis's visit. I also think that he's going to have to weigh whether or not he's going to be able to attract the money and the infrastructure to combat Secretary Clinton, who has such a formidable, dominant strategy and key hold on the Democratic establishment. But there was just a letter from several Democratic donors in Obama world who aren't sold on Hillary Clinton urging Vice President Biden to get into the race. They say that they would open up their pocketbooks and fork over the cash that he would need to run. It's going to be really interesting these next couple of weeks on the Democratic side.
This would never happen, but the best soundbite would be from Biden, well, the Pope told me to run. But that's another story. Kevin Cirilli, reporter for The Hill. Thanks again, Kevin.
Thank you.